Hey guys, in this video, let us learn how we can use GitHub Actions to perform a deployment of Docker container to Azure Web App for containers. So before we start, a quick introduction about myself. I'm Swaminathan Vetri. So I work as an architect at Maersk in Bangalore. I'm also a Microsoft MVP under Developer Technologies. I tweeted SV Swaminathan, and my GitHub sample repositories are available at the SV Swaminathan. And all these videos are uploaded into youtube.com/swaminathanvetri. That's my channel. And I also write technical blogs at swaminathanvetri.in. So the agenda of this meeting is going to be like let's learn how to build a Docker image for .NET Core app, and then let us push that image into the Docker Hub, and let's see finally how we can deploy the image into Azure Web App for containers. In my previous video, I showed about the introduction about GitHub Actions, and also we learned how to deploy a .NET Core app into GitHub, into Azure App Service, right? Using the publish profile and then using the package-based deployment. So in this video, let's use the same repository, the same sample application, and then let's go ahead and build the Docker image for that. We'll push it into Docker Hub, and we'll deploy the image into the Azure Web App for containers. So there is quite a few, some prerequisites if at all you want to follow along with me in this video. So first things, you need to have an Azure subscription. It could be free. Free subscription is also sufficient. And then you need to create an Azure Web App for containers under the subscription. And you need to have the AZ CLI, which is the Azure CLI, installed in your local machine. And also you might need to install the Docker Desktop for Windows or on Mac, depending on whichever operating system you're working on. And you need to have a Docker Hub account to be able to push your images into the Docker Hub. And finally, since the application what we're going to use, this is .NET Core, so you need to have a .NET Core installed in your machine. So with that, in the previous video, this is a sample application which I've used. This is basically a Blazor server-side application for which we had set up the GitHub Actions. So there is an existing workflow file which is trying to do the entire stuff about building the .NET image, .NET application, publishing the application, and then we're directly doing a zip-based deployment into the Azure Web App Service. Right. So in this, let us use the same application, but still we'll go ahead and set it up for Docker-based deployment. So to do that, what we could do is, I have this application opened in VS Code. So I also have an extension, Docker extension for VS Code. So it will give all these different features for you. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press Ctrl+Shift+P and then say add Docker files to workspace, right? So this is one of the easiest ways to add a Docker file for your application. So I'm going to use this extension to do that job for me. So it asks for me what is the application platform, so which is .NET Core application, and I want to build the image based on Linux. So I'm going to select Linux. Since it's a single application, I'm not going to use any Docker Compose file. So I'll say no, and these are the ports for HTTP and HTTPS. So I'm going to leave the default as is. And once it is done, so it is going to get a Docker file for you, right? So what we are trying to do is, so we are trying to use this as a base image, which is a .NET Core/ASP.NET, and 3.1 is the framework version, but that's a tag as well for the image. And from there, we are trying to build the application here. So basically, this is like a multi-stage Docker build. So this is where the entire build of the application is happening. So the .NET Core SDK 3.1, we are using that, and then we are trying to build this entire CS proj, and we're also trying to publish it into an app publish folder, and whatever is published is what we are trying to add it into your as an entry point here, right? So now what we could do is just quickly to check if this particular Docker image and Docker file is working. We can quickly go ahead and build this image. So I'm going to pull up the thing here. Yeah, so docker build -t GitHub Actions Docker demo is the name of the image what I'm going to give, and then we're going to build the Docker image for that. Yeah, so the Docker image build would take it depends on if you have already built some of the images on this particular image based on these images like ASP.NET Core 3.1 or .NET Core SDK 3.1. Since I have it already, it didn't really do a pull of the fresh images. If you're doing it for the first time, you might see it might take more time to pull the entire image, and then it will start building our custom image on top of the base image. So now that the Docker build is complete, let's go ahead and see if we can run this quickly to check what this application is looking like now. All right. So I'm gonna do this docker run -p. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is in this command, I'm trying to run this image, and I'm doing a port mapping of 5000, which is my local machine's port, into 80 port, which is a port in which the application is running inside the container. So if I go ahead and open the browser and say localhost colon 5000. So yeah, so this is the application which is currently Dockerized. So this was the last activity which we did in the previous video. So yeah, so this particular application now it's Dockerized, and then the image is already available. So what we would do next is we'll just go ahead and stop this, and then we can start creating we'll push this particular image, sorry, we'll push this Docker file to the repository, and then we would go ahead and set up the workflow for the Docker. Right, so I'm gonna exclude these VS Code stuffs from the in the repository. So VS Code slash. Okay, so that brings me with Docker ignore file, Git ignore file, and the Docker file. All right, so we are good to go. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and say add a Docker file. Yes, so I'd like to stage everything, and then just say push. Yeah, so earlier once the push is complete, if you go back to the repository here, the already existing action should have got triggered already, which is good. So let's not bother about that for now. So for now, what we are going to do next is we're going to set up the Docker workflow. Basically, I want to build a Docker image every time a code push happens to this particular repository, right? So I'm going to click on this. I've clicked on this new workflow, and then let's see if there are any other existing workflow which we could reuse from here itself, right? So it says workflows for Python, Maven, Docker. So Python, Django, publish Docker container to GitHub packages it is going to do. So I'm not going to use that. Let's see if there is anything for Docker image. Okay, yeah, so there is one which says set up Docker, set up this workflow. So I'm just trying to do this to see if there are existing ones which we could reuse. Otherwise, we can always, build the entire thing from scratch, right? So it is adding an Docker image.yaml. So I'm going to name it as Docker cicd.yaml, and Docker image deployment to Azure WebApp. That's going to be the instead of this particular workflow. So I'll give that name here. And then it's going to run on the push of any change to the master branch or any pull request which is created on the master branch, right? So what it is going to do is it is going to run these steps, which is basically the building the Docker image, right? So Docker build out, and then the file name is a Docker file which contains the instructions for to build the image, and then we're going to tag this. So what I will do is I'm going to use an environment variable to provide the image name so that we can use it in multiple places. So Docker image name is going to be GitHub actions Docker demo. So that's the name I'm going to give for this image, and I would use that here. So $env dot Docker image name. And for now, I'm going to make the tag as latest itself. That means every time a code push has happened, it is going to build the image and it is going to tag it as the latest image name. Okay, so I think we should be good for now. Let's first quickly run through this to see if the Docker build is working fine, and then we can see how we want to push it into the Docker Hub, and further we'll extend it to deploy it into the Azure Web App. So I think everything looks good. So I'm going to do a commit directly to this. Added Docker workflow, and I'm going to commit a new file now. So this should ideally start triggering two actions, because we have two workflows mentioned inside the GitHub folder. So yeah, so one is the .NET Core build and deployment, which was the existing one, and now the second one is Docker image deployment to Azure. So let's go ahead and check this. So yeah, this is the action name, like building the Docker image. Yeah, it's kind of pulling all the different layers which are required to build this image. So currently what we are doing is we are using the GitHub hosted runners to do this. So every time a workflow or the job is run, right, it is going to spin up a new VM for us and it is going to run that. So when we work with Docker based build activities, you might see some amount of delays here, right? Because every time it has to download all the things and all the layers of the dependent images into the VM where it is running. So it's better to use self-hosted runners in these cases, but which we would see later about how we can attach a self-hosted runner. Yeah, so the job is complete. So that means we're able to successfully build a Docker image for it, right? Now, what we would do is we do the further things in VS Code. So I'm going to pull latest of this. So git pull. Okay, so I've got this CI/CD YAML here, Docker CI/CD YAML. All right. So as a first step, what we have done is we've just built only the Docker image, right? Now this image is lying only within the VM where it is run. So now what we need to do is we need to now then push it into the Docker Hub. So to push any image on Docker Hub, we need to have a login to the Docker Hub, right? So I've already logged in here. So what I've also done is under my repository here, right? I've added a few secrets. So if you go to the secrets, you can add the Docker login and the login password as a secret here, right? So I'm going to use these login and password mentioned as secrets, and then I'm going to do a Docker login, and then I'm going to do a push into the Docker Hub. So for simplicity, what I have done is I've created a GitHub gist where I have given the entire YAML file. So I'm going to pick pieces from here and then I'm going to add it into this particular file, and later we'll see how we can make everything better. So yeah, so what I'm trying to do now is so I've just added these steps, right? Docker login. I'm trying to run this command called docker login with the username secrets. I'm reading the username from the secrets, and I'm also reading the password from the secrets, and I'm trying to tag the Docker image, right? So with whatever the okay, this is where okay, I'm trying to use a environment variable for Docker image name because we can reuse it across everywhere. So I'm tagging this particular image with my login slash image. So that's how you need to tag it before you will be able to push the image into your Docker repository, right? So that's the tagging part, and then third part is the Docker push. That means it's trying to push this image into this repository. So now I'm going to save this and I am going to commit this. So add a Docker push. I would commit this file and say push. So now once this is complete, we should be able to see that workflow running, and then instead of just stopping at building, it should be able to push the image into my Docker Hub as well. So let's go ahead and check that part. So if I go to actions, yeah, there are two workflows already created. So I'm going to explore this Docker image deployment to Azure Web App. So when I go and say build, okay, it's still building the Docker image. Okay, yeah, it took about more than a minute or so to complete this entire workflow. You can see 1 minute and 3 seconds, right? So what the last run had only till building the Docker image, right? So now what we have done is we've also added a Docker login, and then we are trying to tag the Docker image, GitHub Actions Docker demo latest, and then we have also pushed the image into the Docker Hub, right? So to quickly check if it's available there, I'm going to go to my Docker Hub and the repositories. I'm going to just refresh this page to see if I'm able to get an image. Yeah, so there you go. So one big geek is what is my repository name, and then this is the GitHub Actions Docker demo is the image name what we have built recently, right? So if you go back to the Visual Studio Code, so you can see the Docker image what we mentioned is GitHub Actions Docker demo, right? So we could see that with the same name, a particular image is already pushed into the Docker Hub. So that completes our second part of what we wanted to achieve. So the next part is to see we need to start deploying this particular image into Azure Web App, right? So let's see what it takes for us to do that. So the first step in doing that, right, so if you in the previous video where we had used the package or zip-based deployment into Azure Web App, so it supports the published profile-based deployments. But if at all we have to deploy it as an image, if you want to deploy Docker image to an Azure Web App which runs the Azure Web App for containers, we need to be able to really use service principles to do that part. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use an Azure login. It's an already available action which would allow me to log into the Azure with a service principal, right? So if you go and look at the Azure actions here, Azure login action in the GitHub, so it's basically you can go ahead and look at github.com/azure/login. So that's the page where I'm currently. So as you can see, these are the steps what it is asking, what I have included in my workflow. All right, so before doing this, so if you recollect in my secrets, I've also had a secret called Azure credentials. So how I generated is by running this particular command. So this is run using your Azure CLI. So basically we're trying to create a service principal for role-based authorization, and you can give the name of the service principal, and we are setting the role as contributor, and it is set at the scope for this subscription and under the resource group. So you need to choose whichever resource group you want. You have your Azure web application running, so you need to choose that resource group and give the subscription ID and then run this particular command. It is going to generate a JSON file and pull that JSON and then add it into your secrets here. So if you go to the secrets, yeah, I have a secret called Azure credentials. So this is what is contained in the entire JSON returned by the AZCLI command. Right, so I have that already in place. So what I'm going to do now is I have already directly referenced it here. This is going to enable me to log in, and then the next step is to do the deployment. Right, so for that we'll go ahead and grab this snippet from here. So the name of the step is like Azure Web Deployment. We are going to use this action, and the name of my app is environment Azure Web App, which I don't have as of now. So I'm gonna create that. Azure Web App is my environment variable name, Azure Web App, and the application name is here. So GitHub Actions Docker demo. Okay, so I've added the environment variable as Azure Web App, and that's the application where I need to deploy my container, and this is the image from where I'm going to take it. So basically whatever we have pushed here, right, the same image we are going to deploy it into this as well, into the Azure Web App. So I hope everything is fine here. Let's go ahead and commit this. Add Azure service deployment. Oops, I think I need to give a space here. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, Azure App Service Deployment. And okay, we added Azure Web App, and then we've added the login, and we've added the command to really deploy. Okay, so commit and then push. Okay, so the push is complete. Let's go back to actions and see if it really started the action. Okay, Docker image deployment Web3. Okay, yeah, now we can see all these actions have come up. Let's give it a minute or so to complete, and then okay, all right, yeah, so the job is complete. So this time it took about 1 minute and 29 seconds. So I hope it should have deployed the latest version into this website. So let's go ahead and check that out. So let me do a refresh of this. Okay. Okay, it looks like it took a time to restart the entire applications. Yeah, now I could see this, it's changed. So I had a different version just to see if the deployment is happening properly. I had a different version installed previously, and now we could see that it's updated. Blazor server GitHub Actions demo. So yeah, so that's how we can easily set up the CI/CD for Azure Web App Service deployment though be it direct package based deployment or a Dockerized container based deployments. It's much simpler and easier to do with a single GitHub workflow files here. So just to recap, what we did in this video is we've created a Docker file for an existing ASP.NET Core application. We built the Docker image, we pushed it into the Docker Hub, and then we've also deployed the same image into an Azure web app. All these things using the GitHub Actions. And that's what I wanted to show, and thank you so much. So if you like the videos, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.